Order! Order!
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432.
The ayes to the right, 202. The noes, order! The ayes to the right, 202. The noes to the left, 432. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. On a point of order. The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the House has spoken and the Government will listen. It is clear that the House does not support this deal, but tonight's vote tells us nothing about what it does support. Nothing about how or even if it intends to honour the decision the British people took in a referendum Parliament decided to hold. And people, particularly EU citizens who've made their home here, and UK citizens living in the EU, deserve clarity on these questions as soon as possible.
Order! Order! There's no good people shouting. There will be an opportunity for other points of order, but the Prime Minister must and will be heard. The Prime Minister.
Those whose jobs rely on our trade with the EU need that clarity. So, with your permission, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to set out briefly how the Government intends to proceed. First, we need to confirm whether this Government still enjoys the confidence of the House. I believe that it does, but given the scale and importance of tonight's vote, it's right that others have the chance to test that question if they wish to do so. I can therefore confirm that if the official opposition table a confidence motion this evening in the form required by the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, the Government will make time to debate that motion tomorrow. And if, as happened before Christmas, the official opposition declined to do so, we will, on this occasion, consider making time tomorrow to debate any motion in the form required from the other opposition parties, should they put one forward. Second, if the House confirms its confidence in this Government, I will then hold meetings with my colleagues, our confidence and supply partner, the DUP, and senior parliamentarians from across the House to identify what would be required to secure the backing of the House. The Government will approach these meetings in a constructive spirit, but given the urgent need to make progress, we must focus on ideas that are genuinely negotiable and have sufficient support in this House. Third, if these meetings yield such ideas, the Government will then explore them with the European Union. Mr. Speaker, I want to end by offering two reassurances. The first is to those who fear that the Government's strategy is to run down the clock to the 29th of March. That is not our strategy. I've always believed that the best way forward is to leave in an orderly way with a good deal, and have devoted much of the last 2 years negotiating such a deal. As you confirmed, Mr. Speaker, the amendment to the business motion tabled last week by my right honourable and learned friend, the member for Beaconsfield, is not legally binding, but the Government respects the will of the House. We will therefore make a statement about the way forward and table an amendable motion by Monday. The second reassurance is to the British people who voted to leave the European Union in the referendum 2.5 years ago. I became Prime Minister immediately after that referendum. I believe it's my duty to deliver on their instruction, and I intend to do so. Every day that passes without this issue being resolved means more uncertainty, more bitterness and more rancour. The Government has heard what the House has said tonight, but I ask members on all sides of the House to listen to the British people who want this issue settled and to work with the Government to do just that.
I will come to other colleagues, but first of all, point of order, the Leader of the Opposition, Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The result of tonight's vote is the greatest defeat for a government since the 1920s in this House. This is a catastrophic defeat for this government. After 2 years of failed negotiations, the House of Commons has delivered its verdict on her Brexit deal, and that verdict is absolutely decisive. I hear the words of the Prime Minister, but actions of her government of the past 2 years speak equally clearly. She is only attempting to reach out now to try to keep her failed process and deal alive after it's been so roundly rejected by Parliament on behalf of the people of this country. Labour has laid out our priorities consistently. No deal must be taken off the table. A permanent customs union must be secured, and people's rights and protections must be guaranteed so they do not fall behind. At every turn, the Prime Minister has closed the door on dialogue. Businesses begged her to negotiate a comprehensive customs union. Trade union leaders pressed her for the same thing. They were ignored. In the last 2 years, she's only had one priority: the Conservative Party. Her governing principle of delay and denial has reached the end of the line. She cannot seriously believe that after 2 years of failure, she is capable of negotiating a good deal for the people of this country. The most important issue facing us is that the government has lost the confidence of this House and this country. I therefore, Mr. Speaker, inform you I have now tabled a motion of no confidence in this government, and I'm pleased that motion will be debated tomorrow, so this House can give its verdict on the sheer incompetence of this government and pass that motion of no confidence in the government.
First of all, just come to the leader. I will come to the right honourable gentleman, of course, but a point of order, the Leader of the House.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I should like to make a short business statement regarding the business for tomorrow and the remainder of this week.
I'm extraordinarily grateful to the right honourable lady, and I accept that she can't be psychic as to what I'm thinking, and I can't be psychic as to what she's thinking. I think the smooth and orderly way to proceed with this matter is to deal with points of order first, and then to come to the right honourable lady's statement, which would be entirely proper and doubtless helpful to the House. Point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Mr. Speaker, we should be aware of the situation that we're in. The clock is ticking. We have got very little time to resolve this. The fact that it has taken us so long to get to this point, frankly, is shameful. This is a humiliating defeat for the government. When I listen to the Prime Minister, it sounds like everybody else is at fault rather than her. She has to accept responsibility for what has happened this evening. Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted that the Leader of the Opposition has come round to a motion of no confidence. This should have happened before, but of course we will support it. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned, it is clear the clock is ticking. The government needs to secure the safety of all our nations and should immediately postpone the Article 50 process and should immediately have talks with all the leaders of the opposition parties. Let's work together in all our interests, but let's listen to the voices of the parliamentarians that have been sent here. There is no support for this deal. It mustn't come back again. The obvious thing to do, the right thing to do, suspend Article 50, put this to the people and a people's vote.
I know the right honourable gentleman won't take offence when I say he was using the device of a point of order, as is entirely understandable in these circumstances, to say what he wanted to say, but he was more interested in what he had to say to the House than in anything that I might have to say to him. It's not a matter for the Chair. The right honourable gentleman has registered his view, and these are the sorts of issues that can quite properly be aired in debate and quite conceivably in discussions that take place with the Prime Minister and other party leaders. But he's made his point with force and alacrity, and it's on the record for colleagues to study. I will take the honourable lady first, right honourable lady first, and then others. Point of order, Jo Swinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With this result of a scale that is unprecedented in recent times, it is clear that this deal, nor any tweaks to it, will get through the House of Commons. So can I ask for your guidance, Mr Speaker, on how Parliament can assert its authority to make sure that we can give the people of this country a say on this deal to resolve this matter? It is a mess that needs to be resolved by the people in a people's vote.
Well, my response to the honourable lady is as follows. First of all, there may well be an opportunity for her to air her own thoughts on that matter, the situation we face and the suggested way forward in the course of debate to which the Prime Minister in her point of order referred. There is that prospect potentially unfolding. So that's one opportunity for the honourable lady. And the second would be those discussions to take place in coming days. And I dare say that the honourable lady will want to take the chance to participate in those. More widely, where there is discussion about Parliament's role and what Parliament might do and what options Parliament might have, I think I can predict with complete confidence that the honourable lady will have a view about that, and that view, which is important, will be heard. And point of order, Mr. Angus Brendan McNeill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister spoke about the will of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and I think we have to investigate that further. When can we test the will of this House on the choices that are now left? The choices are no deal versus revoking Article 50. Can we test these in the House? And bearing in mind, of course, that in Scotland the European Union is more popular in the polls than the United Kingdom, and the Prime Minister should know that.
There'll be plenty of opportunity for testing in the days ahead. I think well, can I just take the honourable lady first? Point of order, Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This isn't a political point of order. Yesterday it was raised the issue of the member for Hampstead and Kilburn and the fact that she should have been undergoing a caesarean section today for a high-risk pregnancy, and she is comfortable with me saying she has gestational diabetes and was asked by her medical team to undergo that at an early possibility. She has had to defer that despite the advice and comments that you made from the chair yesterday that apparently were given no comfort from the government benches. And I think this is shocking. And I have to say that as a doctor, to put our colleague at risk and her baby at risk because we cannot have a method of allowing those who are sick or pregnant is disgraceful.
Well, I note what the honourable lady says, and I don't cavil at it at all. I made the point yesterday. I thought the situation was lamentable. I used that word, I think, several times. The situation was lamentable. This matter, I'm not interested in people chuntering from a sedentary position to no obvious benefit or purpose. I'm ruling on the matter and I require no assistance in the process of doing so. The situation was lamentable. I thought it better that the honourable lady should have the opportunity of a proxy vote. That was my view, and it was a view widely shared. The matter was debated in February of last year and in September. I had indicated my strong support. It would have been necessary for a resolution to be tabled by the Leader of the House for reasons which others can explain. It's not my job to do their explaining for them. That has not happened. I think it's regrettable, but it cannot be sorted tonight. Nevertheless, she's registered her concern. It's a concern and a sense, frankly, of very deep disappointment, to put it mildly, that I share, and it will doubtless be dealt with in days or weeks to come. And my very great sympathies go to the honourable lady, the member for Hampstead and Kilburn, who, in my judgment, should not have been put in this position. Point of order, Yvette Cooper.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has now said that she will listen to voices from right across this House. She has obviously had 30 months in which to do that, and it has led to this defeat for the government tonight, which is the greatest for more than 100 years. We must all hope that she will indeed listen to voices from across the House, but we also all recognise that it will take time, and people and businesses and government organisations and institutions will now be worried that there are only just over 70 days left. The Prime Minister did not mention Article 50.
Order. People talk about respect in this House, but there's a Minister of the Crown shouting at the Right Honourable Member for Normanton. I say in the kindest way, he's normally a very genial fellow. Stop it. You're capable of much better than that. Yvette Cooper.
Given the scale of the challenge, with the clock now really ticking down, the Prime Minister did not mention what will happen to Article 50. Mr. Speaker, can you advise the House on what we might be able to do to urge the Prime Minister, for the sake of businesses and jobs and people across the country, to seek an immediate extension of Article 50 now, so that this can be sorted out?
Well, the answer is, in the first instance, these are matters that can be aired in debate tomorrow. I don't think it's right for me tonight to give a ruling on what the Right Honourable Lady or others should or shouldn't do. She will be aware of the presentation of bill that took place in the name of another member who I believe also has views on these matters. These will be, I'm sure, discussed in the days ahead, not merely in private meetings, but I feel certain on the floor of the House. And of one thing I am sure: that which members wish to debate and which they determine shall be subject to a vote will be debated and voted upon. That seems to me so blindingly obvious that no sensible person would disagree with the proposition. If MPs want to debate a matter and to vote on it, that opportunity will, I'm sure, unfold in the period ahead. I think if there are no further points of order, and I don't think we need any, it is right that we hear the supplementary business statement by the Leader of the House.
I'm extraordinarily grateful, Mr. Speaker. With permission,
be honest. I don't really mind whether she's grateful or not, but she's got the chance. The Leader of the House.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I should like to make a short business statement regarding the business for tomorrow and the remainder of this week. Wednesday, the 16th of January, the House will be asked to consider a motion of no confidence in Her Majesty's Government under Section 2(4) of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act of 2011 in the name of the Leader of the Opposition. Thursday, the 17th of January, debate on a motion on mental health first aid in the workplace, followed by general debate on children's social care in England. The subjects for these debates were determined by the Backbench Business Committee. I shall make a further business statement in the usual way on Thursday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Shadow Leader of the House, I remind the House that the supplementary business statement is subject to questioning, but its terms are comparatively narrow, and I implore members to recognise the implication and spirit of that fact. The Shadow Leader, Valerie Vaz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Leader of the House for the statement and say that the opposition concur with it in the circumstances of the vote. We agree with the debate tomorrow.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Pete Wishart.
Could just wonder, Mr. Speaker, whether you could find any way to confirm that the whole day's business tomorrow will be given to the vote of no confidence. According to the legislation that's set out in the Fixed Term Parliament Act, there's only a requirement for an hour and a half. I'm looking to the Leader of the House just to confirm that the whole day will be available. The Chief Whip is shaking his head, so I am sufficiently persuaded that that's going to be the case. So he's nodding his head, rather, so I'm satisfied that is the case, and the Leader of the House is just about to confirm that.
Yes, subject to the agreement of the House.
It would be useful to know the timings. I mean, ordinarily the Chair is approached about these matters, which is the sensible way to deal with it, but we do need to know what the timing is, and I hope the Right Honourable Lady will either be able to advise now or to confer with colleagues later in the evening, so that there is clarity on that matter. And then we'll be all very satisfied. The Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I can confirm that your office has the proposal for a business motion tomorrow that proposes that the debate takes place for the whole day until 7 p.m.
Grateful, thank you. Point of order, thank you very much indeed. Supplementary business motion, Wes Streeting.
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't sure if we were taking questions on the business statement or points of order, but given the scale of the defeat, the government must surely have seen the inevitable coming. The issues for debate on Thursday are important, but every day wasted is another day closer to exit, particularly without a deal. Are we really debating two motions with no consequence on Thursday, rather than deciding how we're going to move forward on a crucial issue facing our country?
The leader can add to what she said by way of the supplementary business statement if she likes. That seemed to me, if the honourable gentleman would forgive me saying so, a kind of curious hybrid between an attempted point of order on the one hand and a question on the supplementary business motion on the other. And I'm not sure if he had to plump for one or the other, which it would be. But what I would say to the honourable gentleman is that these matters can be aired in debate tomorrow, in the business question on Thursday, and in subsequent days. So I completely understand that the honourable gentleman is seized of the importance of early progress, but that opportunity will unfold in days to come, and I think I can predict with confidence that he'll be in his place, ready to leap to his feet to share his point of view with the House. Yes, is it really going to be necessary? Yeah, Simon Hall.
Mr. Speaker, could you confirm that the timetable set out by my right honourable friend, the Leader of the House, perfectly accords with the amended programme motion which the House voted upon last week, which I would guess that the honourable gentleman voted in favour of, which the Prime Minister would have 3 sitting days.
It wouldn't have been agreed if that weren't the case. I don't wish to be unkind to the honourable gentleman, but he's frankly not adding anything by that point of order, although I'm sure he perfectly well intended to do so, but no additional public service has been provided. If there are further questions to the Leader, I'm sure she'll be happy to take them within the confines of the supplementary business motion, but if not, I suggest to the House that we proceed to subsequent motions, namely, if memory serves me correctly, motion number 3 on energy conservation, the whip to move.
I beg to move.
Oh, well, I'm sure the House wants to hear about the energy conservation motion. The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
Of the contrary, no. The division is deferred until tomorrow. Motion number 4 on exiting the European Union, brackets nuclear safeguards, close brackets, the whip to move, thank you. The question is as on the order paper in respect of motion 4. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 5 entitled Rating and Valuation.
I beg to move.
The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 6, colleagues, on UK participation in the EU Agency for Criminal Justice Cooperation, brackets Eurojust, close brackets, post-adoption opt-in decision, the whip to move. Thank you. The question is as on the order paper. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Oh, the division is deferred until tomorrow. Thank you, colleagues. We come now to the adjournment, the whip to move.
I beg to move this House to now adjourn.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn. Mr. Kevin Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this historic night, I'm sorry that members are leaving, would not be listening to the problems that my constituency are facing at Chester Street railway station. But I'm pleased, Mr. Speaker, that I've secured this debate to highlight the problems my constituency in Chester Street and the surrounding areas who use the station are having.
How did you get this?
Tonight we've been consumed by the debate on Brexit, but it is, I think, Mr. Speaker, worth reminding ourselves that other issues are important to our constituents, and despite our very serious deliberations today, our constituents, many, are just getting on with their lives. Now, Mr. Speaker, Chester Street Railway Station serves not only the town of Chester Street, but the surrounding villages and communities of North Durham. My constituency, as people may well know, borders the Tyneside conurbation. Now, over the years, traditional industries in Chester Street and large parts of my North Durham constituency have moved and closed, and the area now has become a commuter town for both North Tyneside, north of the Tyne, and also parts of Durham and Teesside. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, good transport links are important to the economic viability of my constituency. In Durham County Council's new economic plan, the transport links for the north of the county are highlighted as an important part of that part of the County Durham's economic future. Now, the journey time to Newcastle from Chester Street and south to Durham is less than 10 minutes. So in many cases, in many ways, it's an attractive commuter option for people to live in my constituency and work either on Tyneside, down in Teesside, or in Durham. And for many reasons, that's why people have located themselves in the Chester Street and the surrounding areas. The main rail service in the morning and in the evenings are provided by 3 operators, TransPennine Express, Northern and cross country. But since May of last year, the main problem has been reliability of services, particularly by TransPennine. Not only have trains been late, but on very often occasions they have been cancelled altogether. Now these are particularly difficult for people at the 2 main commuter times. First thing in the morning, when people are keen to get to work at 9 o'clock, and also get home in the evenings. And those commuters have often found themselves either late for work because the trains have been cancelled, or in the evenings stuck either in Newcastle or other stations further south with no ability to get home. In some cases, people not being able to get home until 7 o'clock and later in the evenings. Now, Mr. Speaker, because of the concern that many of my constituents have who rely on the Chester Street Railway Station for their main commute to work, I called a public meeting in November. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it is useful, I think, to just highlight some of the comments that were made, not only at that meeting, but in the numerous emails and correspondence I've received from concerned constituents. First one was, in summary, this week, Chester Street to Darlington commuter train has been cancelled 7 out of 10 times. The service, another constituent said, the service continues to go from bad to worse, with morning services having been totally cancelled 3 out of 4 days in the last week. Another constituent, a working mother, said that she was finding it difficult to hold down a senior executive job in Newcastle as it became untenable for her to regularly miss pre-arranged pick-up times for her children from school because she was stuck in Newcastle Central Station following trains being cancelled in the evenings. Another constituent writes, the 8:24 commuter train from Chester Street to Durham has been cancelled yet again, late for work. Another said, how can the region be taken seriously if our trains aren't on time 50% of the time? Another said, while financial compensation does indeed help, it does not compensate for the trouble that working parents have caused to them by the delays in train and their childcare responsibilities. I've got other constituents who have raised the issue not only just about childcare, but those looking after elderly relatives that in the evenings find it very difficult to get home from Newcastle. So it would not be a gym.
I think if a giving way, he's always very generous, and I'm here to support him as I am with others when it comes to debates. I understand in my research that I did on the subject matter, which the honourable gentleman is referring to, that the idea for the trains is to take people away from cars and buses. But unfortunately, in this instance, there also seems to be the incident, I think you referred to it earlier on, and that's the issue of not getting onto the trains whenever they come into the station. Does the honourable gentleman feel that one way of addressing the issue of overcrowding in trains is to produce a longer train, which we know from our history and usage over here in the mainland? And does he feel that's an option?
Well, it is, and I think the honourable gentleman does raise an interesting point, is that this should be a way of getting people out of their cars and off other forms of transport into Tyneside and down into Durham and Teesside. But and I accept that one option would be to have longer trains, but if the trains aren't turned up in the first place, that is the problem. So, Mr. Speaker, these delays and cancellations are causing real hardship to many of my constituents. I even had one constituent contact with me a few weeks ago saying he turned down a promotion at work because he couldn't guarantee to his employer that he was actually going to get in on time. So, these are real-life situations that are causing a lot of hardship to my constituents. I certainly will.
I think my honourable friend and near neighbour is actually outlining quite clearly that the Northern Rail franchise is a failed franchise. The service that they're giving to the people of the North East, the North West and Yorkshire and Humberside is frankly disastrous. Everyone knows that it is, and yet they're allowed to get away with this nonsense and actually put constituents of my honourable friend and many others in jeopardy of losing their jobs because of a shoddy service.
Well, I don't disagree with my honourable friend, but this is an economic case because we are losing the ability of people to access the jobs that there are on both Tyneside and down into Teesside and into Durham. And the other point is, which I think this is why a lot of constituents feel hopeless, is that what can government do about it? And I think he raised an interesting point about the franchise itself and how it is actually operating. And I think whatever, and I'll mention it later on, whatever we do about in terms of the franchise, it does actually need tightening up in terms of the penalties. The other issue facing my constituents, Mr. Speaker, is the issue that when trains are cancelled, clearly the trains that do turn up are then overcrowded. Now, it is only a short distance, small distance commute, but we've had situations where people have been unable to get on later trains. I also had a constituent who was travelling further afield to York and had booked his journey some 3 months in advance and booked an actual seat, but suffering, and he did that because he was suffering from a bad back and travelling with a friend for a day out in York who was suffering from cancer and had to stand all the way from Chester Street to York, and that, I've got to say, cannot be acceptable. Now, in terms of the issues that are affecting the regularity of services to Chesley Street, yes, some are directly related to the timetable, and there has been quite rightly a lot of publicity around the issues in Manchester and Leeds. But what's happening is a lot of the congestion and issues there are having a knock-on effect further north, because the companies are then cancelling trains and ensuring that they may go to York but go no further north, and likewise cancelling them all together. And the chaos around the Manchester and Leeds area has been well publicised. But what I ask of the Minister, and I certainly ask of the operators, is the north is further north than Leeds and Manchester, and the community, the people that rely on this service in my constituency shouldn't be sacrificed for just making sure that they can get their times right in Manchester and Leeds. The other, I think, frustration on my constituents' part is being TransPennines' appalling way of dealing with customers. Certainly in the evenings when trains are cancelled in travelling south from Newcastle to Chesley Street, there's no information given to the stranded commuters, no alternatives offered in terms of other ways of getting home, and a situation whereby people are just left to make their own way or make alternative provision. But when that's on a regular basis, and if you have got childcare responsibilities, or, as I know one constituent in particular has got an elderly mother she has to care for, then that is not acceptable. Arriving home after 7 o'clock in the evening when you're expected to be there at 5:15, I don't think is very... And that lack of information, and I've raised this with TransPennine, but they again seem to be... There's even no staff, for example, at Newcastle to give information to or provide alternative forms of transport, whether it be replacement buses or alternative train options. The other, I think, issue is around compensation. Now, clearly in terms of compensation, there is a compensation scheme, but again, TransPennine are not good at advertising the fact that people are entitled to compensation. And I think as a one-off goodwill gesture, TransPennine should offer all regular travellers a month's free travel, because people like to put up for this for far too long. And I'd be interested to know whether the Minister has any powers to intercede in making sure that TransPennine do pay a reasonable compensation to people. But I can kind of come back to the point raised by my honourable friend from Gateshead. The issue is about this franchise. It is clearly not working. And certainly I think TransPennine either need to up their game and start acting like a organisation which is caring about its customers, or this franchise should be taken off them. And it's certainly, if we are going for refranchising, it should be looked at in detail how appallingly they've operated it so far. Now, the situation of where Chester Street is located should be travelling by train should be an ideal opportunity for people to access jobs, as I say, around our region. But if you've got inconsistent service, then this is not going to endear people. And certainly in terms of attracting people to live in Chester Street, it's obviously not going to be a great selling point if people can't rely on what should be an easy commute. The other issue is, and I've raised this for many years now, is why later in the day the service goes to a 2-hourly service. And I think in any future franchise we should be looking at a more regular service, because I do think there is capacity here to grow the usage of Chester Street Station, and to reinforce the point made by the Honourable Member for Strangford, take people off the roads and actually onto the railways. Can I also take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to raise the issue around the cross-country service, which does stop at the Chester Street railway station. Now, there is a consultation at the moment about reducing the number of stops that cross-country do, and one of those proposals is to remove the service stopping at Chester Street to obviously increase the connectivity between major cities and towns on the cross-country route. Now, if that does happen, I have made representations on this, and I know the County Council have as well. It is important that those stopping services that are taken away are replaced. And I would like to ask the Minister if he could ensure that that is taken into account in terms of the consultation, that if those stopping services are taken away, that somehow we have a replacement service to replace that loss of, especially in the evenings, of the cross-country which stops at Chester Street.
On that point?
Briefly.
Very, very grateful. There is speculation within the industry that cross-country are actually proposing for the future that some, if not all of the services which come from the south coast of England would actually terminate at York. And never mind not serve Chester Lee Street, which is obviously between York and Newcastle.
Well, if that would be a detrimental step for the North East. But again, I think it reiterates the point I made earlier, Mr. Speaker, that many people look at the north and perhaps think it goes as far as York, Manchester and Leeds, and no further. Finally, can I just raise the issue around investment in Chester Street Station? I've raised with Network Rail the issue around investment in the station. The footbridge over the station is an appalling state of repair. And I've been told that any repairs will only take place or be painted by 2020. And again, I'd ask the Minister anything he can do to try and get Network Rail to address that. That would be very important, because again, if we are going to encourage more people to use the station, facilities need to be improved, and Networks Rail leaving it till 2020 to paint a bridge I think is not acceptable. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, can I say that my constituents have had an appalling experience in a poor rail service through no fault of their own. But can I make this point? This is obviously about raising their concerns and the terrible way in which they've been treated. But for me, it is an important point about the economy and the economy of my constituents and the future of my... I'm sorry, I'm just about to finish. About the economy of my constituency and how viable it is to attract for people to come and live at what is a pleasant part of County Durham.
I call the Minister, Andrew Jones, to reply.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I just start by congratulating the Right Honourable Gentleman for securing this debate. He raises a number of very important issues serving his constituency and broader County Durham, and I will address them all in my remarks. Can I just start by saying I completely recognise how important the Chester Street station is as a vital local link for the Right Honourable Gentleman's constituents. I know people rely upon that station and the services there, and indeed his point that the service is growing can be confirmed because we have seen passenger numbers increase by about 30,000 a year over the past 6 years. An average of just over 600 passengers per day use that station, and people using the station play a vital role in the local economy, including giving people access to employment, as he mentioned, in both Newcastle and in Durham. Now, almost all of its services are provided by Transpennine Express, with a handful of additional peak services from Northern and Cross Country, and I recognise there are performance concerns raised by him and indeed the Honourable Gentleman for Gateshead. I will address those in my remarks. He rightly focused on the central issue of performance and how bad it became, particularly after the May timetable change. Let me stress that I entirely agree. The services that were offered to several parts of our country, including across franchises in the north of England, were unacceptable. But I must also stress that important lessons have been learned from that, and that some of these learnings have already been implemented by the industry and have led to a significant increase in performance. So the planned December 18 timetable changes in the north were deliberately scaled back in favour of a more phased approach. This was about mitigating risks to the extent that it was largely a rollover from the May timetable, with a focus instead on some performance fixes to improve reliability. The focus has been on improving the resilience and reliability of the network. For TPE, Transpennine, this included changes to local services between Leeds and Manchester, and I fully recognise that the north does go further north than Leeds and Manchester. I, of course, represent a constituency to the north of Leeds and Manchester. And these changes have already delivered significant improvements with the provision of standby trains at key locations to help recovery should things go wrong. Now, I look at the performance daily, and I know that many colleagues across the House will do the same, but performance on Northern and TPE has improved significantly since December. On TPE, the performance has increased to around 83% on time. The measure that is used is called PPM. It's available online, and it has now reached 83%. Now, obviously, that presents still a significant amount of room for manoeuvre, and it is below target, but it is also 18% higher than the last period before the December changes. So, although there has been this improvement in punctuality and reduced cancellations, I share the view from colleagues right across the House that this is still not good enough. On Northern, the January figures so far show that around 89% of trains are on time, which is also an improvement on December, an improvement of around 10%. And I'm pleased to report that the number of trains that are late, very late or cancelled has substantially declined. This month, fewer than 1 in 10 have been late, and just 1.3% very late or cancelled. I also recognise the base that they are starting from, and that recovery of trust with their passenger customers is critical and will only be delivered by a relentless focus upon reliability and punctuality. Yes, happily.
I agree with the Minister, but the concern I have with TransPennine, they don't care. For a company which seemed to be, should be focused on what is good for customers, they've got no customer ethos at all. And how we change that, I would love to know.
Minister. Well, that is a very significant point that the Right Honourable Gentleman makes. I have to say that has not been my experience when I've been dealing with the train operating companies, but it is absolutely clear that the communication, which he mentioned in his speech, has not been good enough. And I will come on to address that point in just a moment. I'd just like to finish off some remarks about the performance. Now, as part of a drive to improve the wider performance right across the north, the government commissioned Richard George, who's a very respected industry figure, to review the performance of the region's rail network. He will recommend operational improvements to increase reliability in the short and in the medium term. Richard will coordinate and lead efforts of Network Rail and the operators. His remit is to help industry reach the right conclusions so that passenger impact is central to every planning decision. The passenger must be at the centre of all of our decisions. He's already helped highlight problem areas and will provide his conclusions later this year. In addition, since the May timetabling issues, Network Rail has established a programme management office. This will also help to ensure that future timetable changes can be better planned and managed. There will be no repeat, no going back to the processes that led to the failure of May 2018 and that timetable change. Let me just comment about the communication. I have to say I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for raising the issue of poor information about cancellations and delays. It is something I hear in other parts of our network too, and it is simply not good enough. There are customer information screens at Chester Street Station, and both TransPennine and Northern publish updated information on their websites and social media channels, and we continue to stress to these operators, and indeed the whole industry, of the absolute importance of giving passengers the information they need when things go wrong. This is something that I have raised with the train operating companies and will continue to do so. It has not been good enough. Obviously, I want to get to the place where we don't have to make these changes, make these comments. But until we reach that point, a focus upon communication is important. I will.
In my experience, trains that serve Chester Street moving both north and south can suffer from cancellations because if a train is coming from the south to the north and is late, it is the habit of the operator to terminate that train at Darlington, and therefore not allow it to travel on through to Durham, Chesterley Street, Newcastle, and then make the return journey. Can we actually ask those franchises to stop that practice, please?
Minister. Well, the point that the Honourable Gentleman makes is important, but there is a point which has to be considered in the operation of a timetable, which is how do they recover? If something goes wrong, how is that timetable recovered? Well, additional rolling stock, the Honourable Gentleman mentions, is exactly what is happening. I'm going to come on to rolling stock in just a moment. So I understand his point. I understand also where the train operating companies are coming from, but regularly disadvantaging the same customers is not acceptable. I want to get to the place where we're not in the position where we have to have these questions in the first place. But if things do go wrong, I'd also want to make sure that we have compensation schemes, and we have seen delay repay schemes. And after May, the government asked Northern and TPE to implement special compensation schemes that quickly and fairly reimburse those passengers most adversely affected, and that included regular service users from Chester Street. And to date, over £1 million has been paid in compensation for the summer disruption. In terms of rolling stock, well, passengers will see the benefit of the new huge investment in rail in the north of England, where the new rolling stock enters service this year. As part of the investment in TransPennine, 3 new fleets of Nova trains will be introduced. They'll start to be introduced from May of this year. They'll be introduced through until the end of 2020. For Chester Street, longer brand new trains will be in service, whilst on Northern, the outdated and unpopular Pacers will be removed by that franchise by the end of this year. Passengers using the Northern services in County Durham will see refurbished trains offering increased capacity. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, in terms of the Nova trains, they are faster, they have more capacity, and we are moving from 3 to 5 carriage trains. So that means over 150 extra seats. In terms of the replacement of the Pacers, they're typically being replaced by, in some cases, by refurbished stock that's being cascaded down from Scotland. And these are Class 170 trains, and these are also longer than the trains they replaced. They're increasing in size from 18 metres to 23 metres per carriage, so again increasing the capacity. In fact, the vast majority of the 500 brand new carriages that we will see from Northern and Transpennine will be delivered in less than a year from now, and every other train that is not brand new will be refurbished to be as new. The cross-country consultation was a concern, and that cross-country consultation ended on the 30th of August, and we're conducting a thorough review of its findings. No decisions have been made about the cross-country timetable. The East Coast mainline timetable will be rewritten to all operators in 2020-21. This will be an opportunity to review the current train service at Chester Street alongside wider long-distance service changes. The only decision that's been taken so far is to cancel the franchise competition due to the rail review. And the current franchise ends in October of this year with the option to extend by 1 year. Now, we're looking at options for the franchise, and we are aware of severe overcrowding on that network. So we are looking to bring in additional trains as soon as the appropriate train carriages are available within the existing rolling stock market. But the importance of Chester Street and the North East to the cross-country franchise is noted, and I just ask colleagues here to, they asked me to note it, I have, and I give them my assurance that it will be considered. In terms of the services at Chester Street Station, well, it's managed by Northern. They are conducting improvements throughout the life of their franchise to ensure the station is well maintained. I understand, of course, how inconvenient it has been for passengers in the interim, but the waiting room and toilets are due to be refurbished very soon. As for the bridge, well, we're painting a structure here that spans the East Coast main line, so it's not quite so simple as a regular painting job. It's one that would need to be planned so it would minimise disruption. But the Right Honourable Gentleman's point has been heard, and I will ensure Network Rail are aware of his concerns. Our railways have to be fit for the future, and that requires investment, vision, innovation and ambitious thinking so that our rail network meets the needs of the people who rely upon it. That is the point of our rail review. The service that we have, the structures that we have had, have served us well, taking us from 700 million passenger journeys a year to 1.7 billion. But times are changing, we are seeing huge investment. We are on the cusp of experiencing the benefits of billions of pounds of investment. Our railways are undergoing much needed transformation that as a country we have never experienced before. This will improve rail services in the north of England for good, and it will see rail play its part in driving economic growth right across the north.
Yay. Thank you. Order. The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. And the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.
The proceeding has ended. 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 The proceeding has ended.